Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Ask Me Anything style webinar on server apps and integrating them into your workflow. I'm so pleased to be joined this morning by our fabulous team of FME server specialists here at Save, Sinai, Mark, and Kezia. You guys want to all say hi?
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome. Thanks for tuning in.
Awesome. Okay, so before we dive into, I know Sinai has a fun little icebreaker plan for us here today and a flash demo to follow. I'd love to walk you all through some quick tips for engaging in live storms as our second webinar using this new platform here. If you are experiencing any audio issues, we do have that help button on the bottom left. So feel free to utilize that. There's 4 simple steps to troubleshoot. And then 3 different options to engage. So you can definitely use that react button throughout the webinar if you'd love to share your reactions with us. And then we have the chat panel for sharing any comments and the question panel. So with the question panel, there's 2 different ways to ask your questions this morning. So the first is in person over the air. You can send me a direct message. I have a message in the chat there. You can click the 3 dots on the top right and send a direct message, and then we'll bring you on air and ask you to join us with your question live. And then the other option, if you're more comfortable, is through text. So you can click Ask a New Question under that question tab and type your question into the pop-up window. All right, so with that, I will hand things over to Sinai. If Sinai, you want to take things away there.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Elizabeth. Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm excited to talk about server apps. We normally would kick off a webinar like this with maybe asking you all where you're tuning in from. You know, there's FME users all over the world. But since we're talking about server apps today, we thought this would be a good opportunity to put one into action. So if you're watching right now, I see some of you have already started sharing where you're from. I'm going to drop a link into the chat. And this is a link to a server app that we're hosting. And if you follow that link, it will take you to that server app. And I'm going to share my screen so that you can all follow along. Just one moment. And right now you should be seeing a little web application here. It's built on top of an FME workspace. Took me about under a couple of minutes to create. I have a simple form here with just 2 parameters. We can all enter our names or a nickname. You don't have to share your actual name. And then we can use the next form here to select on the map where you're tuning in from. So for example, I'm going to drop a link onto Vancouver. And then once I select OK, the server app is running a workspace in the background. In this workspace, I've used a Postgres database to store all of these points. And here we're using the data streaming service, which we're going to talk more about, to return a web page back to you. And here we have a map. I've used Esri Leaflet to show this map, and we can see all of our points with our locations and where everyone is tuning in from. So hopefully you guys can access that link and share where you're tuning in from. And then maybe later in the webinar, we can come back to this map and see where you all are. So yeah, take a look at that app, share where you're from. Let us know what you think about it. We're going to dive into each part of how we built the server app just shortly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, and before we move on to our next part here, I will just mention, Brad let me know in the chat that he didn't see the 3 dots showing up. So if you don't see the 3 dots showing up and you'd like to come on air, if you can just type into the chat panel to let me know, and then I'll keep an eye on that in case anyone wants to join us live.
Awesome.
Okay, and it looks like next on our docket here this morning, before we go into some questions, we might give some quick introduction into the geometry picker and how that works. So Mark and Sinai, I know you wanted to chat about that.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start since we just saw it in action. So since I have my screen up right now, I'm just going to go back to that app. And you might have noticed our second parameter here allowed us to drop a pin on a map. So this is the geometry picker in action, and allows the end user to use a map to either drop a pin, which I've configured this particular map to use points, but if I had allowed the option for polygons or lines, we can also use those different shapes and geometries to draw on this map. The geometry picker is just configured in FME Workbench. You can set the bounds of the map that the end user will see. You can set what kind of geometry you want to be sent into the workspace. We can also set custom maps and things like that in this window, which I'll let Mark elaborate on. That's kind of a new feature. So this is also really neat because when you combine it with our mobile application, FME Data Express, we're able to capture the GPS location of the end user. So if you have a geometry picker and you have a mobile app built on an FME workspace, we're able to give these kinds of apps to people out in the field so they can say exactly where they are when they're submitting information to your app, which has all kinds of potential uses for field work and data collection in real time. Mark, do you want to chat a little bit more about setting custom base maps for that geometry picker?
Yeah, so in the map picker or the geometry parameter, there is the ability to set your own custom base map. I guess, and if you want to open up the setting panel on the on that map, just on the top right on that cogwheel button, you have the ability to just paste in an XYZ formatted URL to a web map tile service, and then you can load in your own custom base maps, whether these are public, hosted by another organization, or your own, such as like an Esri tile service. So you can get really creative with how you want to use this geometry parameter, such as providing your own data as the base map that your users can use as a reference for whatever workflow they're doing with the parameter. And I'm just going to paste a link into the chat right now to one of our articles that we have written up about the different ways to configure and to use the geometry parameter in your workspaces and how to work with it in FME Server. And also, if you go all the way to the bottom, there are several links for publicly hosted base maps. So if you want to use like a satellite base map, you could use the Google Maps or one of the Esri satellite base maps. Yeah, so that's the main thing to highlight with the custom base maps. Yeah, Sanai or Kezia, did you have anything to add about this?
That was a good overview. I just want to add that there are lots of free tiling services available, and I think we linked to a bunch of them in that article. So if you're not already set up with Esri or Google or something like that, we can also use STEM and OpenStreetMaps, I think is another one, World Map Tiler. Yeah, it's kind of fun to tinker around with tiling services and see what we can create.
Yeah, I think you guys covered it. I think I don't really have much to add for this one.
Awesome.
Excellent. And I do see we're getting a couple questions already. Maybe while other people are thinking of your questions, getting your juices flowing, we can ask a question for our audience here. We do have a couple polls here. So we'd love to know, I'll publish this here. Do you currently use gallery apps? So you should see that pop up on your screen now. Give everyone a moment to vote here. All right, and once you voted, you'll see those results come in live under that poll tab. It looks like most people have not heard of them or haven't had a chance yet. It's cool.
Okay.
You'll learn something new today for sure.
Yeah, maybe we can have a quick sort of discussion on gallery apps, and maybe we could even show what they are. If you're not already using them, I'm excited for you because they're pretty neat. Yeah, does anyone have a example ready to show what a gallery app can look like?
Yes, I do. I can share my screen real quick. Let's see.
Awesome. Yeah, so while you get that started, I a gallery app, I can just chat about what they are. A gallery app is kind of a web page or landing page for a collection of your server apps and workspace apps. So if you have maybe a certain department that needs to do sort of common workflows, let's say you have a planning department and they need several different CAD themed server apps, we can collect those into one web page so that those employees are able to access all of those links from one place. They don't have to have, bookmarks folder full of the different apps that they need to access. You just have one web page where they can select which ones they need to use. So yeah, looks like Mark's got one up here to show.
Yeah, just for a demonstration gallery app, as Sinai had mentioned, what we have here are just 3 different workspace apps that we've configured separately. So as we had shown earlier with that map picker, that was just one server app. But if you wanted to have a collection, then the gallery app really comes in use where you can put everything on a single, like a landing page. And you also have the ability to add your own links. So if you want to point to any particular link in your organization or something that you want to let your users access, you have the ability to add that along with Workspace apps. And then you have the same ability of customization. You may have noticed that we had a custom banner on that app that we had showed earlier with that picture of the world map. So we give you a lot of options for changing header banners, footer text, footer banners, and so on. And when your gallery app is ready to go, you just have that single link to access your set of apps. And you can see here, it's just a simple web interface. You don't have to do any coding. We handle all of that for you. And then you just set up and add your apps. And then the users just need to select them, and then they can start running and interacting with these apps. So this is really useful, especially for cases when you want to share a whole set of workspaces with people in your organization or with the public. And what is really highlighted here is the fact that they don't need to know how to use FME or FME server. All they need to know is how to navigate to the apps and how to submit parameters or files. Yeah. Anything else to add, team?
Just really quickly, I think something that's really great about, I guess, workspace apps and gallery apps is if you have certain workspaces that you don't want or you want to tailor the permissions to, you can set require authentication to specific apps, and users can have access to the landing page. But if they want to select server apps that they don't have access to, then they'll have to have a login splash screen to fill in first. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that's great to have everything in a landing page, but you can also tailor the permissions that way. Anything else to add?
That was great. I think everyone who hadn't heard of server or gallery apps, I hope you have some time to try them out because they're pretty neat.
Excellent. Okay, and I do see we've got a couple questions in the panel now, so why don't we kick things off with one of those. So the first one here, what are the different types of workspaces that are useful to run with server apps? Does anyone want to take on that one?
Yeah, I think this question has, a lot of answers. We can do a lot with different workspaces and FME, and I'd say the best workspaces for server apps are going to be ones that are self-serve. So if you have a workflow that you'd allow others to run with different data, different parameters each time, that's going to be a great candidate for a server app because we can turn it into this web application that we can share with others more easily. They don't have to access FME server. They don't have to have a login to FME server. They can not even know what FME or GIS or data, what kind of data you're using is. It's really easy to set up a user-friendly interface for different workflows. Also, those kinds of workflows that require end users to submit or request data. So end users can upload files at runtime really easily. They can run the workspace with their own data. And we can also use different FME server transformation services with server apps. So when you put a workspace up onto FME server, you have other options other than just submitting a job. You can use the different web services offered. So that would be something like data streaming or data download. Data streaming, we saw with that Where in the World Are You app, we were able to enter our information and the server app returned a web page to us. We can do that with other kinds of data. We can return tables, that kind of thing, images, lots of applications there. The data download service is another one that's really handy with server apps because we can return a link to a download. So they can request data and our server app can return it back to them in a zip file. Yeah. Anything else that I missed there? I feel like we could keep talking about different kinds of workspaces for server apps for a while. We have some great examples we could share as well. If anyone has them handy.
I have a landing page for getting started with FME server apps, and that article has a bunch of interactive demos of server apps that we can look at. So I can just drop that in the chat now. And yeah, some other examples would be data validation workspaces or format translators. And what else? There's so many.
Yeah, no, that's true. And that page is a great place to explore different kinds of server apps that we've made. Most of them, I'd say, probably have a tutorial that you can follow along with as well. Those tutorials, you can work off those to create your own server apps for whatever your needs might be. I'd also maybe mention our safe.com/demos page. There we have some great examples with server apps as well as custom web applications. Yeah, I'll drop that link in the chat as well.
Awesome. And then maybe before we end on this note, we do have a question from Aaron on if there's a working example from a city that uses this platform.
We can definitely, there's definitely cities out there using server apps for either internally or externally to share these workflows with the public. To rattle off a couple examples, some of the more popular uses for them would be, like Kezia said, a data validation tool. So if you have employees that are, or even the public submitting something like a CAD plan, we can run a data validation workspace under a server app, check for maybe geometry or, all the parameters are filled out that need to be, and that saves an employee a lot of time. They don't have to check, every single detail in the file before they're able to get to work. We can return feedback to the end user right away saying, hey, you need to check out, you've got a couple errors on these polygons. Please, check those out and fix them, resubmit. So data validation's a big one. What else? Maybe like a plan submission portal, that kind of thing. I'm sure if we have a moment, we can pull up some of our customer stories with some of these examples for you and share those links with you all. I bet you we'd have some on our website that would be good to share. I don't know, Mark and Kezia, do you have any specific examples off the top of your head?
Yeah, there's a customer that I was working with of ours who has been using gallery apps and server apps to create a data download portal. So they had various workspaces that allowed the user to select different types of data sets, whether it be related to pipelines or streets or bus networks, and then they could select and specify particular parts of those data sets that they wanted to download. And it's really simple to use and really easy to set up. I guess just to show really quickly one of our own sample workspaces that we provide with every FME server is one workspace called Austin Download. It's one that maybe some of you have even just tested out yourselves, but it's pretty much what I had just described about like a data download portal. So in this case, we're allowing the user to select various layers of data that they would like to download. In this case, so you can pick like airports, railroad networks, or streets. So if I just wanted the railroads, I could select that. And you can give the user the ability to specify an output coordinate system. And note that there are only 3 options here. So when it comes to setting up the parameters for these workspaces, you have the ability to limit what exactly a user can select for these particular parameters. So that applies to output coordinate systems and also output formats, so that you're not necessarily giving them more information than they need to know. You're only providing them with the options that are relevant to them. So in this case, if I wanted to download it as a shapefile, and if I wanted to specify a bounding box with this search envelope, I could use that. Or if I wanted to use the geometry parameter in replacement of this, so that the user could draw a shape around the city of Austin to specify the area of interest that they have, you could do that as well. And then they would just run the workspace and then get that download link in the end to get that data. So that's another popular method of using the server apps with like a data download portal. Yes, and I or Kezia, did you find any other use cases?
I don't have a specific city example, but I did pull up the data validation server app that I can showcase really quickly. Let me just share my screen. So any organization, even cities, local governments, they can create a server app for their users to upload their, for example, CAD GWG to validate. For example, if we have a incomplete file data that we upload, we can check how it goes. And then the workspace is running in the background and it streams back an HTML report page that is with a map of what is invalid as well as the error remarks. For example, the diameter is incomplete, it's set to 0. That seems to be most of the errors in this CAD file, but there's also geometry errors and other ones that you can tailor to your data as well.
Awesome. And Kezia, while you have your screen share open, we do have a popular question here. How do parameters show up in the server app versus Workbench? Is that something we might be able to show and tell
For sure, I
audience?
can pull up something really quickly. I have a workspace. Here is just FME desktop, and we can set up different user parameters using the navigator panel and the user parameter. You can manage them here, and you can add a bunch of different types of user parameters, which include choice, color, date, time, file, and so on. And they show up, some may show up differently on FME servers, so we can take a look quickly what it looks like. So for choice, you can fill out the value and display. For geometry, this is one that we're pretty familiar with by now since we've had a quick test with Sinai's server app. It does look different. We don't have a map to pop out and select. You would have to fill in the JSON or GeoJSON yourself. And then for date, we do have a calendar that you can select here as well. And file number, you can set the numeric precision to integer, float, and even custom as well. And password is going to be encrypted, and data as well as your HTML file that we're going to be displaying back. So once we have this published onto FME server, then we can go into FME server. And I created a server app really quickly off of this workspace. So for example, the choice, it would be a drop down from the options that I specified in desktop. For geometry, we have the map once again. And you can do polygon, line, or even marker. And for date, here is what it looks like in FME server. We can select the date this way as well and choose a time as well as the minutes. And then file, you can upload file or you can browse the resources. And number, you can toggle the number, the password, you can display or hide, and then here's the text data. Is there anything else that you guys would like to see for user parameters wise or publish parameters?
No, those are the big ones, I think. I might just mention that, yeah, within that user parameter manager and FME Workbench, that's where you can configure them to be very granular. So if you only want to accept certain kinds of files, you can set that in there. A lot of these parameters are going to have a lot of configuration options. So you can really fine tune what kind of data you're receiving from the end user. And of course, once it's in the workspace and we've accepted those parameters, we have all the tools and transformers of FME Workbench to validate and transform those parameters. So if your end result data needs to have everything capitalized, you can do that. You can format dates. You can do all of those sort of things. Validate email addresses. Yeah, we can make sure that the data is good in the end through lots of different means.
Yeah, I'll just add that we are just scratching the surface when it comes to parameters here. You can create them through the parameter manager, or you can create them directly through your readers and writers or your transformers. And there's a lot of flexibility in how you want to set up those different options. Like with choice, you can either have like a drop-down menu, or you can have a list or like a tree view where your users can select more than one option. So there's a lot of different ways you can make use of this. And I will also note that if you are not using FME 2021 or up, this is where you can be using this new user parameter or the parameter manager interface. So this is definitely something that is worth upgrading for.
I think so, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, moving on to another popular question here. How do I work with files, for example, shapefiles or multiple files submitted at the same time?
I think I have another quick demo for that as well. So I can show you the workspace that I built in FME Desktop. It's just reading in a shapefile, sampling out one feature, and writing it out to a shapefile again. So I have that published on FME server. And here is a workspace app that allows for multiple file uploads of shapefiles. So you can upload the shapefile of your choice. Let's see. And the Shapefile Reader will be able to read in the shapefile and skip through the sidecar files and go through the translation that way. And here is the data download service. So it returns a URL of the files in a zip folder. So we can download that. And once we open it up, here is the shapefile with one feature. Anything else, Marcus and I, you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'd say that's a good example for when you're using the Shapefile Reader. It can automatically detect which file that wants to run the workspace with. I might mention that you can also have the end user submit that as a zip file, and we'll be able to handle that in the workspace. If you are using something like a generic reader, however, which is often put to use for server apps because a generic reader allows you to accept all kinds of different files. So that allows your end user to have a lot of flexibility with the data you're running with. However, if you're using that generic reader, you're going to have to instruct the end user to upload all of the sidecar files, but just select the shape file specifically at runtime. And I think we have an example on our community that does that. Perhaps the Easy Translator has a tutorial, maybe data validation. We can try and find an example that uses different kinds of files, including those with sidecar files to share with you. I'll drop that in the chat, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add, but this is a bit of a segue and related to one of the questions that was just asked about figuring out who ran a server app. Kezia, back in the screen where you had the jobs view, I noticed a new column in there that we have not seen in previous versions of FME Server. You'll see on the side that in FME Server 2022, we have added support for ran by. So now you no longer need to be tracking users through authentication. And now we have a new column and amount of, or a set of data that we're tracking in our job history, which is knowing who ran a particular workspace or server app. And you can pull that data into your workspaces as well through our FME server parameters. I guess, Kezia, if you wanted to open up FME Workbench just now, in the Navigator panel where we have been using like the FME server resource macros, this is a really common one. We have added a new parameter here. I can't remember exactly what it's called. FME server runtime user. So that is where you can be pulling that information in about the runtime user for the workspace. And yeah, just to reiterate, this is now supported in FME server 2022 and up. Was there anything anyone wanted to add about that?
Nope, that pretty much covers it for me.
Oh, I'll just add that was highly requested on the community, actually. I believe that's where that idea came from, to track the runtime users. So yeah, just to highlight, we have an ideas page on the community where you can submit your ideas for things that FME you'd like us to consider doing, integrating into the product, such as viewing a runtime user for a server app. So yeah, definitely check out the ideas page if this is sparking any ideas from you right now about server apps or anything else FME.
Awesome. And we do have a handful more questions that have come in here. If you do see a question that is relevant to you as well, feel free to upvote it and we'll maybe answer in order of popularity here for these next set. Starting with this question we have from Suresh. So this question asks, can I use automation in server app?
Anyone want to take this one? I can. Yeah, not yet technically, but coming soon in a 22 release, we're going to have automation apps. So you'll be able to create server apps on top of automations directly. So that's going to be really useful for some of your more complex workflows. You can build in a lot more logic in an automation. You can have several workspaces connected, do all sorts of job orchestration inside of an automation. I'll just plug, we have some great webinars on automations and tutorials if you're not familiar with those. Yeah, so that's really exciting. I'm looking forward to automation apps. Do we have any more information that we can share right now with users or viewers on what those will look like?
I don't think we have any articles yet, but we do have 2022.1 beta available on or safe.com/downloads, and you can definitely test it out there. I think it is available to create and build automation apps with this beta.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Do you guys think it might be helpful to quickly maybe give a snapshot of what automation is for the audience in case they might not be familiar?
Yeah, sure. I can do that. So our automations are a method of taking workflows and running them in response to various events on FME servers. So typically these events can include like running workspaces on a schedule in response to receiving an email in an inbox, directory being updated, like a new file being received or being updated. And we also have a manual event. So that is how we are planning to be integrating the automations with server apps so that when a user is running an automation app, they are running it manually, and then their information that they're submitting will be then counted as an event that runs the automation. We do have a getting started article with automations. I can just send that really quickly now in the chat if you want to read more about that. So I'll just need a second. Here we go. Yeah, so if you don't know what automations are and you want to learn more, definitely check out our Getting Started article on that.
And like these automation apps is going to be a game changer because you'll be able to create apps off of more complex workflows and perhaps run multiple workspaces in your automation and have external actions as well. So it'll be really exciting once it's officially released. But you can definitely test it out now as well.
Okay, just taking a scan through the question panel here. Does anyone see one that they might want to pick out from the group next?
Just while you look for questions, I'll just add on one last point about that automation apps question that I think we overlooked. If you want to integrate automations into your server apps in sort of a roundabout way, but perfectly doable, we can utilize the FME server REST API. We actually have a endpoint that can trigger a manual trigger to set off an automation. So how that would look is you'd have a workspace. You can accept parameters into that workspace just as you would with any other server app. And then you could feed it into a REST API call that sets off an automation. So you could connect that workspace, that singular workspace, to a whole other automation if you'd like, and have that run and do any sort of workflow processes you like, and then return a result back to the same workspace. So you can connect the two actually quite easily as it is right now, beta or not. The manual trigger, I think, was introduced a couple releases ago. So if you're on a recent version of FME server, you should have access to that. And I'd visit the FME server REST API docs, which I'll share right now, for you all to look up that endpoint. It's not too difficult to set up, especially if you're familiar with REST API calls. Even if you're not familiar with our REST API or any API, we have also some great tutorials on getting started with APIs in general and webinars, which I've had a lot of fun presenting in the past. Yeah, so just shared that documentation in the chat there, and you'll find the manual trigger endpoint under the automation section.
Excellent. Okay, and so our next question here, we'll start the live answer. So this is from Brad and Rob. Is there a way to fill in a form and location offline and then sync when back online? Is that something someone wants to take on?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually am not sure if we support that yet. Let's see, Sanai or Kezia, do you know? the answer to this one?
You'll likely need to have an internet connection in order to access a server app, just because you'll need to access the URL and connect over the web. Trying to think about a workaround for this type of workflow. If we don't support it right now, again, I've plugged that ideas page again. If you have some new ideas like this one, which I think is a really good idea, I'd highly encourage you to submit it to our ideas page so that we can gather support for it, and maybe it's something that we can bring in the future.
Yeah, I think to run the server app, I would need to be online, but you could perhaps create a form for users to fill out offline and have them upload this form onto the server app online and then run the workspace that way. But yeah, ideas page would be a great idea as well.
Yeah, I definitely see where this is coming from, like probably the Data Express app. So like if you're working in the field and you want to be able to submit those forms while offline, I can see how you would, I guess, preferably want to have those parameters preloaded so you can just submit, and then imagining that it's queued to send, and then once you have internet, then it'll send. So I can definitely see the applications there for the Data Express mobile app that we have. But when it comes to submitting just from, let's say, from the web interface, if a user was to bring their laptop into the field and not a mobile device, I can also see that being something that we'd want to support for server apps in general and not just server or the Data Express application.
Yeah, and I'd mention there could be alternative workflows to something like this. Like I'd say there's a good use case for automations in here. Automations can be triggered by all sorts of events. So we can set up a schedule to pull, say, a directory folder. So if you have users collecting data and saving it to a location on their local computer, or maybe they're on Dropbox or something like that, we can pull that location with whatever frequency we choose. So maybe every morning, every afternoon, once a week, and we can pick up all of the new data there and update our sort of end database or wherever we need to send that data. So it doesn't need to be a real-time event either. With automations, we can set it up on another schedule or anything else for your workflow. Lots of options. I think our word of the day is going to be flexibility. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, and before we move on to our next question here, maybe this is a good time for another poll. So I'll go ahead and launch that. So the question we have for you today next is, do you have workflows that you would like to share with others? So your organization or the public? We'd love to know where everyone's needs are at there. Once you've submitted your vote, you'll be able to see the results come in live on that poll tab.
It looks like a solid mix where we have about half who don't and then half who do.
Yeah, it looks about 60% that do now at this point. Awesome. Cool. Thanks for letting us know, everyone.
Sometimes this might be something that we hadn't even thought of. You might think of it in a week or something when you have some specific niche case where you're like, I could actually use a server app for this. I have those moments all the time. I know we use server apps internally here at SAFE all the time to gather information from SAFers. You know, we could vote on what we'd like for lunch, or we can submit different requests and sizes for a, say, FME t-shirt, that kind of thing. Since they can be created so quickly, it's a really good solution for just routine information gathering.
Yeah, there's another workflow that we as a team we use very regularly is our out of office monitor. So it's an app that one of our safers, Chris Berger, created. You may have worked with him or chatted with him before, but he created an app that we can submit on our own that sets the dates that we are out of the office and on vacation. That way, when we are away, it will pull for our support cases that we're working on and notify the rest of our teams that they can respond to any if it's needed. So that really emphasizes the self-serve side to server apps, where it's just up to us users. We don't have to do anything like notifying people manually. All we have to do is set and forget. So that's another like really useful scenario for making use of the server apps.
Excellent. Okay, and our next question here from Linda. She's wondering if it's possible to capture the person who ran the server app without making them log in or require authentication.
Yeah, that's a good question. I believe right now it is based on the login user to be able to see them in the FME server interface as the run by user. Otherwise, I think it'll show up as maybe the owner of the app. I'll have to confirm that. But if there could be a way around this. For example, if this is a public facing app, I might just create a parameter that says, what is your name or email address or something like that. Make that parameter mandatory. So they have to submit who it is, and we can capture that in the workspace, send it to an Excel file or any kind of spreadsheet, database, that kind of thing. Yeah, to record who's running the app. It's a bit of a workaround, but it would just be as easy as setting up a text parameter in that workspace.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. And a follow-up on Jeff's previous question here. How do I add that new Active Directory imported user role to my allowed users on server apps?
Good question. Let's take a look. Unless does someone here know off the top of their head?
I haven't tried this before, but I'm assuming it should be a drop-down option for allowed users if you have imported Active Directory user roles.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll see if I can find some documentation on it, though.
Jeff is confirming it's not in the drop down. Sorry, Jeff. Okay, let's take a moment maybe to find the correct answer for Jeff, and we could definitely come back to that one. I think we could rustle up an answer pretty quickly. Let's see.
Good.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Next question here from Dan. Previously in the geometry picker, if you clicked on home, you ended up in Vancouver. Is that something that has been solved now? Is that something we know, team?
That is a good question. I think we'll probably be able to prove that. I don't recall this bug myself, but if we go back to Sinai's Where in the World app and try out the home button, let's see what happens. Zoom to initial bounds.
Yeah, I believe it's a something that you can set now in the geometry picker. So there's probably a default location set in that parameter when you create it, but right there upon creation, you just set the initial bounds for wherever you'd like that map to be centered on. So I think for the Where in the World app that we started off the webinar with, I set the initial bounds to just the entire world. So if you click that home button, it should just zoom out to the entire extent of the world. If you wanted to base it in Austin, we could set the center point there. That's customizable now if it wasn't before. Yeah.
Yeah. It looks like it has been fixed as of, let's see, what version is this cloud instance in?
That is going to be, I believe, our newest 22 release.
Okay. Yeah, so definitely for 2022, but I think we'd have to confirm for the previous versions. There's probably a bug ticket for it somewhere internally, so we can check and confirm that.
Yeah, I believe the fix was fixed in 2021.0.
Awesome. Thanks, Kezia.
Yeah, I got it from Holly.
Awesome. Okay, and then we do have a question that's come into the chat from Shankar. So is it possible to filter automations by the workspace name used? And then the same question for server apps as well.
These are good questions. I'll admit I have to double check some of them. Let's see. You can find that one pretty quick, I think, too. There's lots of different filtering options, I know, for when you're looking at your job history. You can always sort by the source and the workspace. So if you're looking at previously run jobs or ones in the queue, you could definitely filter it out by source as a workspace app, and as well as the workspace name used in that app. That's a quick way to find all the jobs run by that app. On the actual server apps page, we don't have filtering options yet, but if you're managing lots of server apps, I could see how that would be useful. One thing you can do real quick though on the server apps page is use that search button at the top. You can type in the name or I think repository too to filter it that way. Any sort of information associated with that app that shows up on the page, we can type in and filter it that way, if that's helpful.
Awesome. Lots of good ideas in the chat from users here too, which is see.
Yeah, I feel like if maybe you can create a tag for all the automations that you use in server apps, then you can filter by tags that way. But currently, I don't think there is a filter specifically for that.
Good ideas, though.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. It does look like we've gotten through all the questions in the question panel at this point. I'm just going to take another quick look through. I know we have 5 minutes remaining here, so if you do have any other burning questions, make sure to get those in now.
Yeah, and just to let you know, if we have not gotten a full answer to any of your questions, or you still have some that are going to be submitted a little bit later that we can't address, we'll be able to answer those privately after the webinar's ended, and we can contact you about those.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have a question come up right after we end, no worries. We'll definitely leave things running a few more minutes and get to those in the question panel. All right. With that, thank you so much, everyone, for your awesome questions this morning. Some that have even managed to stump our team of specialists, which is amazing. We appreciate all the ideas and questions. We do have a community badge here today as a thank you for joining us. So I will get Hannah's help there, dropping that link into the chat. Perfect. Thank you, Hannah. Today's code, FALWP. And the peak of data integration, our 2022 UC. If you have yet to register, now is the time. Coming very soon. It's already June 1st, so August 24th to 26th, just a couple months away. Register now. And we have lots of upcoming webinars and a lot of great on-demand content, safe.com/webinars if you're curious to learn about any other topics. or see what we have coming up in the next couple months. And then I know we do have some resources here to share out with the audience based on some questions we received. So if you would actually like to download the slide deck now as an attendee, you can do that by clicking on the top right of the slide screen share right now. You'll see a little icon pop up. And if not, we will also be sharing out this slide deck and resources in an email post-webinar later today. Once again, thank you so much, everyone, for coming and all your amazing questions. And a big thank you to our team of panelists. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. It's been fun.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye for now.